What up, what up? Welcome back to the Star Wars Mark of Balance podcast. My name is Mark. Hope you guys are doing okay. And today we're going to be getting into the dark side of The Last Jedi, which I'm sure there are so many people out there cheering and they're so excited to hear the bad things that Last Jedi did. And there are. There are plenty of things wrong with The Last Jedi. And I think a lot of it stems from its narrative choices, really. Though I defended the narrative choices in the last video, saying they were good continuations of the character arcs from The Force Awakens, I think that's all they were character arcs, and I don't think they made a very cohesive story. And I think for all the themes that The Last Jedi does right, I think its weakest department is the narrative structure and decisions made in the movie. So I'll get right into it. I'm not going to try and ramble for you guys, and do this. So since Luke was such a big part of my light side video, I want to start off with him and his arc throughout this movie. While I think his arc does a great job of showing the overall theme of letting the past die, learning from your failures, moving forward, I do think the narrative choices to get to that conclusion were not the best, which I think might be my theme for this episode, that though the themes are well thought out and they fit well into the Star Wars universe, I think a lot of the narrative choices to successfully give those themes are not always the best. So with Luke, obviously I'll just start with the controversial scene, him going to basically kill Kylo or Ben in his room at the Jedi Temple, where he was training the next generation. I think the scene was trying to draw from Return of the Jedi, when Luke, gives into his anger and almost kills his father, even though he came there to not kill his father. I think while that's a good sentiment to draw from that, I think in this case it's very off-putting because it's a child. I think people have every right to be upset with that choice and to be outraged by that Luke showing there, because I was off-put by it when I first saw it. I wrestled with it for a while. I was like, did I really like that narrative choice that he was about to kill his nephew? I mean, it's a little intense. So I think while there are arguments that support it because of the necessity of that trauma for Ben and Luke to learn from, I think that choice of having him coming into the room at night and killing Kylo might have been a little much. Obviously, I'm not a writer, so I don't know how I would change that. I'd probably have to think about that. But I think the root of the trauma for the overarching theme of letting the past die was not the best choice by Ryan. The next thing I was a little iffy on with Luke was, after talking to Yoda, after having this epiphany to learn from your failures and, your students are going to move beyond what you are, and getting all that extra knowledge, I think his final battle with Kylo on Crate is very underwhelming in the dialogue department. Though I really like his scene where he sees Leia and he's like, no one's ever really gone. I really like that scene. I think his dialogue with Kylo is really weak. I mean, he says he's sorry, he apologizes, but I don't think his actions necessarily convey that. I mean, most of the time he's just there to distract Kylo from getting to the Resistance. I mean, he's basically just toying with him, which I think is like the last thing you should do to someone you victimized. And it doesn't seem like he really learns anything from it. He says he wants to learn from his failure and learns to accept his, legendary status or whatever. And then he shows up and he's like, "What's up, kid? What, are you angry? What, are you going to attack me? You should attack me." He literally fed off Kylo's trauma to buy time. So, no matter how good the theme is, I think, with that choice, it's definitely going to turn people off. And people have every right to be turned off by it, because I didn't think I really liked it when I saw it. And the more I watch it, I think the less I like it. So I think overall with Luke, his theme and his progress that he makes in the movie is almost undercut by his decisions when he gets to Crate. And anyone who had a problem with Luke in the movie, I understand. And I think people that really were into the movie and really were into Luke and his whole storyline, that's great. But you definitely have to take a step back and understand where the other side's coming from. That, yes, Luke is impulsive, and yes, he almost did destroy his father. But, this is, a nephew of your sister and your best friend. You've seen this kid grow up. You only knew your father for, a movie and a half. Yeah, So yeah, good theme for Luke. I'm glad he wasn't a stagnant character. I'm glad he could still make mistakes at this age, and he's not a perfect person, but I think it was a poor execution for a couple narrative choices to get to that theme. Another thing that I've mentioned before, fake out deaths. In the Rise of Skywalker, they were so blatant and so overused that it really took me out of that movie, and one of the reasons I didn't enjoy it a lot. In this movie, there is a fake out death with Leia, and it's a weird scene. It's shot very oddly. They call her like Mary Poppins Leia when she's in space. It didn't feel like Star Wars. And the only reason I bring it up is because I was so harsh on The Rise of Skywalker for having these fake out deaths, so I have to bring it up in this one. Though I do think it serves a better narrative purpose because it does drive Kylo forward in his quest to erase the past. And you see the struggle within him because he couldn't do it, but his fellow pilots did. And you saw that struggle within him, and it kind of sticks with him for the rest of the movie. But I think the way they shot it, the idea that the Force was holding back the vacuum of space, and the only reason she was freezing because I guess the Force can't stop temperature changes. I just think overall the scene was very odd, and it brings up this idea of the fake out deaths. And, I think it would have served a better purpose if Leia did lose herself there, and Kylo had to live with that even more. But I know they had bigger plans for her in the 9th movie originally when Carrie Fisher was alive. Rest in peace. And I also don't think they could have Luke and Leia die in the same movie. I think that would have been a lot. But yeah, I think the fake out death in this movie was done a little better than Rise of Skywalker, but I totally understand why it was off-putting and weird. Weird, I think, is the best word for it, because it just, I don't know. But as always, I think Star Wars should not play with the idea of death. Death should always be a permanent thing, and it should always be a catalyst for people falling to the dark side because they tried to prevent it or reverse it to no avail. That's what I think it should be. I get it as a story driver in this movie, but I think the execution was not done well. Another thing that was done really weird in this movie was the comedy. I know that everyone knows exactly what I'm talking about. A lot of the comedy portions or the dialogue that they tried to make really funny, it just came off as like a parody of Star Wars. Like, when Luke throws the lightsaber over his shoulder, I like the decision, but the way the music just like cut out and he just like walks off screen, it was like jarring. I was like, I get that was supposed to be like funny, but that was really weird. Or, the opening scene where, Poe is going straight for the dreadnought and he has this back and forth with the officers on the deck. And it was almost like they were getting pranked. It was almost like I was watching like Pranked. Like they were like, what's going on here? And then Huck's getting like thrown to the floor and dragged. Like that was, I think my whole theater like laughed when he hit the floor, but I don't think it was supposed to be funny. Like there was a lot of points in this movie I'm like, are they trying to be funny here? Because it was just like so awkwardly done. I don't know. The comedy I think just tried way too hard in this movie. Another thing that was really funny that just shouldn't have been funny was the throne room scene for, as good as it was, when like Kylo and Rey are going back and forth, and then Kylo's like, you're nothing. You're nobody. You don't matter. It was like everyone kind of like chuckled in the theater, and I was like, I think that was supposed to be like serious, but just the way it was portrayed, and I don't know if that was Ryan's direction or not, but it was just another thing that was just offbeat and odd in the movie. I think the comedy that was done in the original trilogy, especially Empire Strikes Back, was very natural, sarcastic, and this movie just seems like very forced, which I understand you got to inject comedy into things to keep it light, because this movie is kind of like dark and a downer a lot, but you got to do it in the right way. And I think The Last Jedi does not do comedy well at all. I think there's maybe one or two things that were funny. I like the people on the island of Octu not liking Rey, like she keeps ruining their thing. I think that's kind of funny. The porgs were, porgs, they're silly penguin looking things, and then Chewie's like eating one, like that was kind of messed up too. It's funny, but like another weird beat in the movie. But yeah, overall, I think the comedy was not done well in this movie, and definitely didn't make it feel like a Star Wars movie any more than the other problems with it. As I'm recording this, I'm kind of finally understanding the theme of why it wasn't well received more and more. It's just every thematic good choice is then offset by like a poor narrative choice. I don't know if I just solved it for myself and maybe some others, but, I'm thinking about the scene where, Rose and Finn, like, awkwardly kiss. I don't know, like, she saves his life, and then she decides that in that moment she needs to kiss him. I don't know. I think their relationship was great, like, platonically. Like, they were getting a new understanding of the universe and the whole war like together, and it was a good dynamic between them. I didn't hate Rose. I kind of like her in the movie, but I understand why in her storyline people won't like her because of the narrative choices with her. I think the sentiment that she does with, we should fight for the things we love, not fight against the things we hate. I like that, but then you say such a nice profound thing, and then like you kiss Finn when there was just never any implication that there was that kind of love there. So I think that theme is completely undercut in that scene because of what she did. Like, no matter how much you liked that theme, when Rey kissed him, you were just kind of like, why? Why did that just happen? Once again, I'm thinking of something else that narratively undercuts the theme of letting the past die. This movie is trying to say that, Star Wars needs to move forward, needs to branch out. It can't be so locked into the past that it can't do new things. And as I'm saying this, The Last Jedi is just as guilty as The Force Awakens was for taking from the original trilogy. Granted, The Force Awakens is almost beat for beat A New Hope. Like, that is almost scary how close those scripts are. But The Last Jedi isn't innocent of it either. I mean, when you think about it, it's an isolated master who failed and is now cutting himself off from the galaxy, and a student that is eager to learn, and they both say, Luke's like, I don't want to train him. Yoda's like, I can't train you. Crate, even though it's salt, not snow, I mean, it's the same as the Hoth battle. It's big walkers that are now bigger and different looking, but essentially doing the same thing, going towards a resistance base. See, even in my head, they're the same thing. And to get to the resistance base, there's trenches that are dug in exactly like they were on Hoth. And then they have to, instead of destroying a shield generator, they have to destroy a shield door. So like there, it's like the same thing. So while it's not a lot of similarities, some of the main beats in the story take directly from the original trilogy, which completely undermines the idea that we can't keep recycling Star Wars content in this new stuff. We have to branch out. Like, it Let the Past Die, this movie draws from old Star Wars movies again, which, as I'm saying this, it's all coming together. The puzzle's coming together. The narrative is what holds this movie back from executing its themes. And the final thing I want to get into is that I think another thing that makes The Last Jedi a movie that a lot of people criticize is that it feels like more of a collection of character arcs than a full cohesive story. I feel like Finn and Rose's story arc, and even Poe's, would not have been changed based on Rey's arc, and vice versa. I feel like the only thing that comes of it is in the end when Rey comes back and saves them. That doesn't necessarily mean that there's a cohesive story because the characters end up together. I feel like each of the characters got a satisfying arc and continued the storylines that were brought up in The Force Awakens, but I don't think they were all tied together to a point where characters were advancing because of each other or learning from each other. I mean, Rey, Luke, and Kylo were all tied together, and that's why I think their story arc was the strongest. But Poe and Finn, they kind of make this plan, and then the plan that they make just has no effect because they fail. I mean, Finn and Rose fail. And Poe is just kind of there to learn the lesson that he needs to not rush into war, and he needs to sometimes retreat to live and fight another day. In the original trilogy, New Hope, the whole gang pretty much stays together the whole time. Empire Strikes Back, Vader uses Luke's friends to draw him in and trap him and force him to face him. So even though their arcs in Empire Strikes Back were very separate, Luke was on that planet training by himself for most of the movie, at least there was a cohesion to it in the end. Finn, Poe, and Rey really in this movie just have no connection between any of them, and none of their story arcs rely on each other. And I think that's another reason people were just not enthralled with the movie. And that is all the stuff I wanted to talk about, really. As I recorded this, like I said, I came up with my overarching theme, that, everything that The Last Jedi does well thematically, it shoots itself in the foot narratively. Every good decision is countered by, like, a bad one. So, overall, if these decisions were the reasons you didn't like the movie, I totally get it. I definitely wrestled with, like, a couple of these decisions as I saw the movie. The first time I saw the movie, I was like, oh, I loved it. That was great. Second time, I was like, that Luke thing was a little intense. And then the third time, I was like, oh, I still really like this movie, but like some parts of this movie I don't like. And the crate battle is really close to Hoth, and I criticized Force Awakens for it, so I have to criticize it here. And I guess, going through this video, it all kind of came together, and now I totally understand why I don't love the movie, but I love it at the same time. Yeah, I have found the balance. So if you like the movie because of the light side I brought up, cool. If you don't like the movie because of this dark side or any other reasons you didn't like it, that's cool too. I totally get it. But I want to hear your thoughts. Interact with me on social media at *Wars_Mark of Balance on Instagram, and we could have a conversation about it. A civil one, a not angry one, because I don't want that. And it's almost fitting that the day or two before I release this episode, the final part of my Last Jedi Light Side and Dark Side, it has been confirmed that Rian Johnson's trilogy is still happening. And like I said, in my light side, I think he can craft really great themes in the Star Wars galaxy. I think he understands it really well, but I think where he needs to improve is narrative choices. I don't know if that was because he was shoehorned into the trilogy and he kind of had to work with the characters he was given. I think that problem might get solved when he's able to do his own characters, like in Knives Out. He's able to make his own characters, make his own relationships, and just put it in a Star Wars universe. So I'm also very excited for that. I am optimistic, not cautiously optimistic like the other time. I am optimistic that he will deliver, for sure. So yeah, back to the outro. I'm probably going to be taking a little bit of a break from these analyses. Yeah, I'm in grad school. I don't even know the plural of analysis. But I'll probably be taking a break from these because they are a little more intensive than some of the other reactions. But I am getting into something I'm really excited about. I'm not ready to share it with you guys yet, but it's going to be something that's, really community-oriented, Star Wars community-oriented. And it's going to involve you guys, and I think it's really going to, bring the Star Wars community together. People that love Star Wars, bring it together. That's the whole point of the podcast. That's why I really like Star Wars. So I'm super excited for it. The first one will be coming out soon. It is involving my sister, Jennifer, and it's going to be great, and I think you guys are going to love it. So, as always, stay healthy, and may the Force be with you.